I want to break down this interview last night. I just want to frame it for people. So, and this is important. I want people to understand who Stephanie Ruhle is. And then we can jump into the conversation, because a lot of people are like, who is this person if you don't watch MSNBC? This is her on Bill Maher last week. Let's take a quick look.
She's running against Trump. We have two choices. And so there are some things you might not know her answer to. And in 2024, unlike 2016 for a lot of the American people, we know exactly what Trump will do, who he is, and the kind of threat he is to democracy.
I don't know.
So it's unclear to me.
That's it. Okay, so we're clear. She is an MSNBC host. She thinks Trump is a threat to democracy, and she is obviously supporting Kamala Harris. That's who they chose to do this interview with. Julian Epstein, I want to start with you. You've been critical of the Kamala Harris campaign media strategy. Was this a good move by her to choose Stephanie Ruhle and MSNBC? Was it just, I want to check a box, it's a safe space? Or was it a good move to allow her to lay out economic issues?
Well, it was a safe move. I don't know how much she accomplished. I don't think she answered any difficult questions. I think we're all old enough to remember Tim Russert and the kind of interview you would get from a prosecutor cross-examining a witness. And it was very useful, and it would reveal a candidate not just on their policy, but their strengths and weaknesses, their ability to think on their feet, their ability to deal with unanticipated questions. That's what I would call journalism. What we saw last night was not journalism. It was activism masquerading as journalism. She did not answer. She was asked the question on Nippon Steel. She didn't answer it. She was asked the questions about how she would distinguish between the Trump and Biden tariffs and tariffs she would impose. She couldn't answer that. She was asked about price controls. No answer on that. Asked about immigration. Why couldn't she impose the kind of immigration controls that Trump had in his first term? Sort of no real answer on that. It just seemed more vaporware to me than anything else. And I found it very, very embarrassing for somebody like Stephanie Ruhle, who wants to be thought of as a serious journalist. This was not journalism. This was cheerleading last night.
Stigall, I mean, look, Pennsylvania's a battleground state. There's a lot of people there that are what the media has now called Harris curious. They are interested in her, but they want to know more about her. I watched last night, and to Julian's point, I kept going, like, I don't get this. Julian knows this. We all know. I mean, like, if you prep your candidate, you can say you're going to get asked about, these issues. These are definitely going to come up. It was an interview about economics. She had just done this speech in Pittsburgh, in your state. And I felt like, at the very least, give 5 points. I'm going to lower the corporate rate on this. I'm going to cut regulatory, whatever. Just find 5 points and get past the question at the very least. And to Julian's point, I felt like it was like, I'm going to talk, say words, but I'm not going to answer the question. Then obviously there was no follow-up by Stephanie.
Yeah, the interview was a stunner. I think that the Kamala Harris people saw her little performance on Bill Maher's show Friday and said, there's our pigeon right there. That's our out. They've been accused of not talking to the press. Okay, let's go with that lady. She literally said we shouldn't expect answers from her. Even non-answers are better than Trump. Well, yeah, I want to get to that.
I want to get to that in a minute, because I think that's important for people to see what the reaction, because Julian's point is, you did this on Tim Russert. He would have been like, you didn't answer the question. And he would follow up usually twice to get an answer and then say, all right, you're not going to answer the question. Let's move on. But the audience knew he tried to get an answer. Last night,
telegraphed she's not interested in that. She's telegraphed, I am not going to press her or even ask her anything. And if she can't answer, I'm moving on. And she went on to explain to her colleagues in previewing this interview, hey, yeah, she wasn't clear and direct about a lot, but, whatever. She's not Trump. I mean, it's the strangest thing. It's actually worse for Stephanie Ruhle than Kamala Harris, to be honest with you.
All right, you've brought this up. So before I ask Ashley to respond, I want people to see even Stephanie Ruhle said it was okay. Let me play for the audience what you're talking about, because after the interview, she goes on her own network and says, look, I'm going to address her not answering the questions. Take a look.
And one could watch that and say, well, she didn't give a clear, direct answer. That's okay, because we are not talking about clear or direct issues.
All right. So, Ashley, you just saw that. She's explaining to her colleagues, Yeah, she doesn't have to answer the questions.
For 3.5 years, we heard from the establishment media how terrible of a vice president Kamala Harris was. We heard they made fun of her. They made fun of her laugh. They were complicit in exposing really how terrible she is. And on that day that Joe Biden decided he was not going to run and then a couple hours later endorsed her, the machine turned on and they all fell in line like they always do. It reminds me, there was an interview of a girl in DC and she was asking people, are you supporting Harris or Trump? And the people who said Harris regurgitated the media's talking points of threat to democracy. But the people who said Donald Trump said, our economy, our border, my life was better 4 years ago. And I think that just goes to show you just how different our country is right now between people who are truly affected by the policies and then the elites and the establishment who, it doesn't matter if a bunch of people are flown into Springfield, Ohio. It doesn't matter if, you pass the IRS 87,000 agents who are going to audit the lower and middle class. It doesn't matter if you pass massive government spending that's going to drive spending up, because it doesn't affect me. And that's why I think you see so many people leaning into the America First policies, and it, again, exposes the corruption of our establishment media.
Julian mentioned price gouging. I want to play that clip for people because she was asked about it. She's made price gouging an issue as president. So this is how the exchange with her and Stephanie Ruhle. Let me play it for everybody.
Prices are still high.
Yeah, I agree with you.
You said you want to take this on by going after those who engage in price gouging.
Yeah.
But as somebody who supports free markets, who's a capitalist, how do you go after price gouging without implementing price controls? Because once we get in this zone, people start to get worried and they say, I don't know what she stands for.
So just to be very frank, I am never going to apologize for going after companies and corporations that take advantage of the desperation of the American people. And as Attorney General, I saw this happen. In the midst of an emergency, whether it be an extreme weather event or even the pandemic, we saw it, where those few companies, not the majority, not most, but those few companies that would take advantage of the desperation of people and jack up prices. Yeah, I'm going to go after them. Yes, I'm going to go after them. And that is part of a much more comprehensive plan on what we can do to bring down the cost of living, including housing, including the everyday needs of the American people.
Julian, let me just ask you this. You're a message guy. You get this, right? Just on its face, yes or no, is this an issue? Like, is price gouging a smart issue for her to be focused on?
No, because I don't think there's any evidence of price gouging.
Right. Okay.
If you look at, and I think it's sort of a road to nowhere, and I think it reveals a vaporware in her campaign platform. Profits in the grocery industry are about 1.5%, and you notice she didn't answer the question about whether there should be price controls to go after what she sees as inflation. I mean, the major issue that we have with, perpetual inflation or chronic inflation as a problem we have to manage is we're looking at a $2 trillion built-in deficits every single year. The public debt is growing by at least $2 trillion a year right now. That eventually is going to create inflationary pressures. Any economist will tell you that.
No, everything you're saying, I agree.
But it's a bad place for her to go because it's the wrong answer to real problem, and it's an answer that I think is going to wind her up in a lot of bad areas. I mean, look at just what happened in Argentina. I mean, they had rent control that had been going on for over a decade. The new president has just abolished rent control in Argentina, and prices for housing are coming down. Rapidly. I mean, if there's any modern day evidence as to why price controls are a disaster, just look at what's happening in Argentina right now. So it's a bad place for the Democrats to go.
She's using this issue, though. I mean, look, I'm not trying to. I don't speak for Kamala Harris. My thought has always been that she's using this issue of going after price gouging to sort of escape the issue of inflation and say, it's not inflation that's causing all of your costs to go up. It's price gouging and I'm going to tackle it. And even at that, I don't think that most people buy it. That's the problem.
I don't think so either. And you can sort of deflect as much as you want to with smoke and mirrors over the inflation problem, which was a problem that was created by the supply chain and then greatly exacerbated. When Trump left the White House, the economy was going at 4.1%. The notion that we would dump $1.9 trillion into the economy was a disaster at that point. And it goosed what was already a structural problem, the supply chain. The problem with her using that as a tactic, which is I think your question, is that dog don't hunt. I mean, I think most economists think it's lame-brained, and I think it sort of just doesn't resonate with voters.
Right.
I think she would be far better off saying, look, we made a mistake. We dumped way too much money into the economy when we didn't need to. And what we've got to start doing right now is figuring out ways of trimming the sails on federal spending.
Yeah, Chris, the thing that's interesting is you go back to the last thing that we talked about. She brings up an issue that she wants to make paramount in her campaign. I'm going to be, and then when asked about it, right, again, you should be able to on any issue that you're supporting, have like 3 points to buttress it. You know, in order to do that, like when Donald Trump gets asked about inflation, he goes, well, first thing we're going to do is we're going to drill. Then I'm going to do this. Then I'm going to do this. Boom, boom, boom. You may disagree with him, but he can articulate how he's going to achieve the goal. And again, whether or not it's effective or not is a separate issue. She gets asked this, and I'm thinking to myself, you brought it up. You said that you're a price control, that you want to go after price gouging. And then your answer is, I'll never give up on that. I'll never apologize. It's like, no. Just tell me what the plan is. It's like, you know, hey, I want to go to lunch today. What's our plan? And going, I'll never apologize for wanting to eat.
You're right. Like, and there's a woman in Philadelphia that I have been playing a clip of for weeks now. She talked to a pollster. She was part of a focus group about inflation, as a matter of fact. She's a black woman from the Center City urban core area of Philadelphia. And while she didn't blame Kamala Harris, she did blame government. And she said something really extraordinary. She nearly brought to tears talking about the cost of a bell pepper. She very specifically said bell pepper. She said, they're killing us without killing us. And she said it's the government that's doing it. Now, I don't know if she connects that to the current occupant of the White House and his vice president. But to your point, I don't think people buy it. They do believe it's the government causing it. They understand that. And I got to go back to Stephanie Ruhle one more time, because while explaining this interview to her colleagues, she said, well, yes, she's going to exacerbate inflation. She intends to spend more, but she blamed the American voter, Stephanie did. And she said the American people, it's like they've forgotten or no longer think debt and deficits matter. So again, give Kamala Harris a pass on her plans to inflate the economy worse, because the American voter apparently doesn't care. Stephanie Ruhle had a disaster of a day yesterday, and I know she's not on the ballot, but it was an abysmal performance by a journalist who should have held Kamala Harris to an account.
Why are we using that word? She is not. I mean, if you go on a show and endorse another candidate,
yeah,
and again, she has every right. I'm not. I mean, she has. I have a show. She has a show. You have a show. Like, this is America. You want to go express your point of view. I have no problem with that. That's what makes us America. I'm glad it is. But we give her a pass then and go, okay, NBC still lists her as senior economic whatever. It's like, that's not. You can still be you can be a pundit. God, I am. You are. Right. I don't ever proclaim to be a journalist. I'm not. Nope. My goal is not to be even. I have a side. I want people to know it. I believe my side is better, right? Julian believes his side is better. That's great. That's what makes America so awesome. But the bottom line is she's not a journalist, and we give her a pass because she's got a little tag that says NBC News on it. You know, Ashley, I feel like I was surprised this morning when I woke up to scan the stuff. Like, I'm looking through Politico and a couple of, like, her economic speech in this interview were buried. It was like, it was like she got to do it, check a box, and then no accountability.
There's never going to be accountability for her. That's just how it's always been with the radical left and Kamala Harris. One of the things she talked about also was the American dream. And she admitted that the American dream is gone. And she's right. But the truth is, she killed the American dream. It's because of her watch. It's because the runaway inflation, the crime, the border chaos. She started in California. She's carried it across our country. She was the border czar. She's being held accountable for none of this. The only people who can hold her accountable at this point are the American people. And they've got to do it by November 5th by voting early.
Well, if you enjoyed this content, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and click the notification bell to get more.